In the murky depths of the lower Mississippi River, where ancient currents whisper tales of mystery and madness, a tragic mishap unfolded on a seemingly ordinary December morning. The date was December 8th, 2017, a day that would become etched in river navigation folklore, marked by an inexplicable disappearance that would baffle investigators and forever haunt the maritime industry. For Maritime Mishaps, this is a deeper dive into the terrifying tale of the towboat Ricky Robinson and the misfortune of its crew and cargo. The Ricky Robinson was no ordinary boat. Constructed in 1976 at the Louis G. Ortiz Boat Company in Krotz Springs, Louisiana, she carried with her decades of riverfaring history. In the year 2000, she found a new home with Wepfer Marine Inc., a company that would become her final custodian. A significant transformation came in 2010, when the vessel underwent a meticulous overhaul at Wepfer Marine's Memphis shipyard. Her main engines were replaced, and her breadth expanded by nearly 2 feet, a rebuild that seemed to promise many more years of service on the lower Mississippi. Standing 66.5 feet long and powered by a thunderous 1400 horsepower engine, the Ricky Robinson was a twin-propeller towboat built for the unforgiving nature of river navigation. Her primary mission was simple yet critical, moving barges around fleeting areas and docks, a thankless but essential role in the maritime ecosystem. On this fateful day, 2 souls manned the vessel, a pilot and a deckhand locked into the grueling maritime work schedule. Their rotation was punishing, 5 consecutive 12-hour day shifts from 6 AM to 6 PM, followed by 5 nights, then 5 days of rest. On December 8th, they were 3 days into their daytime shift, a period when fatigue begins to seep into even the most seasoned mariners' bones. Their day began at 6:15 AM, the familiar rumble of the engine, a morning soundscape they knew by heart. At approximately 10:59 AM, the Ricky Robinson departed from the Consolidated Grain and Barge Company's fleet at mile 730, headed upstream towards the Secor AMH Intermodal Container Terminal some 4 miles away. The river that morning was typical. There was a current estimated at 3 to 4 miles an hour pushing against the vessel. The Ricky Robinson moved in a light boat condition, carrying no barges, traveling at approximately 6 miles an hour, though witnesses would later note something peculiar. Both engine room doors stood inexplicably open as the boat began its upstream journey. The pilot navigated carefully, using 2 steering rudders to combat the river's persistent current. Everything seemed routine, until suddenly it wasn't. Around 11:25 AM, something went terribly wrong. The vessel suddenly veered sharply to starboard, an abrupt course change that brought her closer to the left descending bank. Her speed became erratic, first dropping from 5.4 miles an hour to 4.4 miles an hour, and then rapidly increasing to a peak of 7.6 miles an hour. The final telematic signal, captured at 11:26:28 AM, showed the boat moving at 6.5 miles an hour, a mere 500 feet from the riverbank. A chilling distress call crackled over VHF Channel 10. "We're going down." The pilot of the nearby vessel Betsy Ross, docked at the CGB facility, heard the transmission. When he looked up moments later, he saw the Ricky Robinson broadside to the river current, drifting towards the bank. But in the instant he looked down to check his own vessel's deck, the Ricky Robinson vanished completely. Almost simultaneously, a dispatcher at Economy Boat Store received another distress call on VHF Channel 11. The message was desperate and clear. "This is the Ricky Robinson. We are in distress. We are 1 mile down from you and are taking on water. Please send someone." Rescue efforts were immediate. Crew Boat 2 launched at 11:31 AM, reaching the last known location just 4 minutes later. But instead of finding a vessel in trouble, they encountered a scene that made the hair on the backs of their necks stand up. Nothing but floating debris. Backpacks, a mini fridge, a seat cushion, a life jacket, a lunch cooler, ropes, and an ominous sheen of oil, all spreading across the water's surface. The situation was officially dire. By 11:39 a.m, multiple search and rescue vessels converged on the scene. The Betsy Ross arrived, joined quickly by 2 more boats from Economy Boat Store. Within minutes, 4 vessels were searching desperately for any sign of the Ricky Robinson or of her crew. The US Coast Guard Sector, Lower Mississippi River Command Center was notified at 11:42 a.m. A response boat arrived by 12:20 p.m, joining an expanding search that now included state and local teams, vessels scanning the water, and even a police helicopter scanning from above. Wepfer Marine mobilized every available resource, scouring both water and riverbanks. But the river, as always, kept its secrets. The scene revealed fragmented clues, wooden paneling scattered along the riverbank, papers floating aimlessly, buckets adrift, and an oil spill cleanup kit lying abandoned. In terms of the Ricky Robinson herself, there was no substantial trace. Investigators turned to technology, attempting to piece together the puzzle. They sought surveillance footage from nearby locations, such as a highway bridge, local businesses, and law enforcement cameras. But every potential source came up empty, as if the river itself had conspired to erase all evidence. Mobile phone records offered their own cryptic narrative. The pilot had made no voice calls from departure until the sinking. His last text message came at 11:10 a.m, with final data usage recorded between 11:13 and 11:20 a.m, a 19 megabyte download ending 6 minutes before the vessel's disappearance. But the phone itself was never recovered, leaving the nature of that final digital communication a haunting mystery. At the heart of the enigma were the 2 human beings on board, a seasoned pilot of 35 and a young deckhand barely 19 years old. Their story was one of routine and unspoken risks, of warnings unheeded and mysteries left unresolved. The pilot was no amateur. Since April 2007, he had carved his path through Wepfer Marine's ranks, ascending from deckhand to steersman, and finally achieving his license as a master of towing vessels on western rivers. 4 to 5 years of piloting experience marked his credentials. He held a lifetime of river knowledge seemingly compressed into a single Coast Guard rank. His young companion, the 19-year-old deckhand, had joined the company in September 2016. In many respects, he was an apprentice on the cusp of learning the river's most profound secrets. Toxicology reports would later confirm he carried no drugs or illicit chemicals that might have contributed to the vessel's fate. His actual cause of death? A stark but explainable drowning. When salvage crews finally raised the Ricky Robinson from her watery grave approximately a week after her disappearance, the vessel told a story far more complex than anyone had anticipated. The hull showed no significant structural damage, no external wounds, no violent impact, just an absence of explanation. But inside, the vessel painted a different picture of impending disaster. The deckhand's body was discovered in the most mundane of locations, the washroom of the alleyway leading to the portside door. Tragically, he remained entangled in a 2-inch polypropylene rope stored in the shower, his work vest, his only potential lifeline, still fastened. The pilot, by contrast, had vanished completely, leaving behind zero trace. The pilot house revealed its own disturbing pattern. Windows at the aft end were completely blown out. Furniture had disappeared as if erased, including the pilot's helm chair. Only the control consoles remained undamaged and intact. The official examination of the vessel's systems revealed other curious details too. Both propulsion levers remained engaged in the forward position at the moment of sinking. The tiller controlling the flanking rudders sat at the 0 position, while the steering rudders had been turned hard to starboard. Was this a final desperate attempt to correct course? or a random artifact of the vessel's final moments. Witnesses had reported both engine room doors open while underway, yet during salvage, only the starboard side door remained open, tied back to the stairs with a rope. A small detail, or perhaps a critical clue. The Ricky Robinson carried a secret, a history of water ingress that had become almost routine to her crew. Maintenance logs revealed persistent issues with the forward stern void, documented leaks in September 2015, October 2016, and February 2017, all mysteriously marked as resolved. The most recent entry, logged by the company's safety manager, spoke cryptically of steering tubes heavily leaking, but no further details were ever provided. The vessel's 2010 overhaul had added a unique feature, installing a downward-facing window in the pilot house to monitor deck water levels during light boat conditions. Company protocol was clear. Encountering water meant reducing throttle, disengaging propulsion, or even reversing course. Video footage would later demonstrate how water behaved on the Ricky Robinson, cascading over the bow rail, flowing across the deck, potentially flooding the stern voids with increasing volume as speed increased. The shift change that morning carried its own subtle tensions. The outgoing pilot declared everything all good, a seafaring platitude that would later sound ironic. But the outgoing deckhand told a different story, instructing his replacement to, quote, "keep pumping the stern void," end quote. He had personally pumped water from that area multiple times during his shift, leaving an electric submersible pump inside the void. A former deckhand would later corroborate ongoing concerns about these stern voids, recalling an incident where the vessel had nearly sunk during a previous maneuver. 2 days before the accident, Wepfer Marine's monthly inspection found no structural issues. Company policy mandated walkthrough inspections and detailed reporting, yet no equipment status spreadsheet was ever found. When salvage crews finally raised the Ricky Robinson from ground zero, the destruction was both obvious and ominous. Placed in a dry dock, the vessel underwent a meticulous forensic investigation that would slowly unravel the mystery of her catastrophic sinking. The initial examination revealed a landscape of subtle, almost imperceptible failures. Hatch covers for the aft voids had vanished, leaving investigators unable to definitively assess their watertight seals. Systematic testing then followed. Void spaces were flooded, decks inundated, all a methodical attempt to trace the path of water that had claimed 2 lives. Most spaces showed no sign of external leakage, but in the forward stern void, a critical weakness was shown. The starboard side rudder tube bore a telltale scar, a missing, corroded, or broken weld seam where it connected to the top deck stood as potential evidence of the vessel's fatal vulnerability. 2 critical discoveries awaited within the forward stern void as well. First, despite aggressive pumping efforts, a pool of water remained trapped between longitudinal frames, roughly a quarter of the void's total capacity. No drainage system existed, meaning complete water removal would require constant manual intervention. More ominously, when investigators flooded the void to approximately 7 inches below its top, water began flowing directly into the engine room through an unsealed cable canal. No evidence suggested this critical passageway had ever been properly sealed. Testimonies from previous crew members painted a picture of persistent, almost routine water accumulation. The vessel would list to starboard, requiring frequent manual pumping, but this was nothing more than a band-aid solution to a potentially catastrophic problem. Investigators identified multiple potential water entry points. The rudder tube's compromised weld could be an internal source. Externally, water might enter through top seals, waves washing over the bow, or deck submersion. The most probable explanation? Unsecured or open hatch covers, allowing water to flow freely into the vessel's vulnerable spaces. Video footage and crew interviews revealed the Ricky Robinson's vulnerability. In light boat conditions, water would routinely wash over the bow, flowing across the main deck. With fuel and water tanks nearly full and aft voids likely flooded, the vessel's freeboard had been dramatically reduced. Roughly 2 minutes before her final transmission, the vessel made a desperate maneuver. An abrupt starboard turn, speed dropping to 4.4 miles an hour. This was likely the pilot's final attempt to beach the flooding vessel. The distress calls would later confirm the crew's awareness of their dire situation. The turn created a catastrophic chain reaction. Floodwater shifted, creating a port side lean. The deck edge dropped below the waterline, and water rushed onto the aft deck, flooding the stern voids at an exponential rate. The open port engine room door became the final conduit for total destruction. Again, maritime regulations were clear. Vessels must operate to minimize flooding risks, and pilots must ensure all hatches and openings remain secured. Yet Wepfer Marine's internal culture told a different story. After the accident, the company blamed the deckhand and pilot, but former crew members argued otherwise. They revealed the vessels routinely operated with watertight hatches and engine room doors open, despite explicit company policy. The vice president of operations claimed ignorance of ongoing issues, yet maintenance records exposed the lie. It didn't take a maritime expert to find instances of repeated water intrusion, multiple repairs, and a void that required pumping 2 to 3 times per shift. The conclusion from the National Transportation Safety Board was unequivocal. The Ricky Robinson sinking resulted from the pilot's decision to operate at excessive speed with unsecured hatches. Wepfer Marine's systematic failure to enforce safety protocols and to address ongoing maintenance issues had created a perfect storm of maritime disaster. A vessel lost, 2 lives claimed. A stark reminder of the unforgiving nature of the river, and the deadly consequences of neglecting maritime safety.